Want to start therapy and you don't know how to do that, how to look for a good therapist, or you have done therapy before, but now you want to give it a good chance. You don't want to choose just by luck. You want to actually find somebody who's a good fit for you. Where do you start? That's what we're going to discuss today. How to choose your therapist, your psychologist, psychotherapist, and what are the signs of a good therapist? Hi, my name is Vassia and I'm a psychologist. I've been practicing this profession for the last 16 years, and I think I have a pretty good idea about what makes a good therapist or a good fit between you and your therapist. So today's discussion will be in two parts. In the first part, I'm going to give you some ideas, some tips how to choose. What are the important things that you need to focus on when you're choosing for your therapist? And on the second part, I'm going to give you some signs, 6 signs of a good therapist. What is it that when you see it, you can be more sure that, okay, we're going to do some good work here. All right? Let's start with the first part, how to choose your therapist. First of all, um, you can go online and you can, just Google what it is that you're looking for. Focus on the symptoms that you want to treat. Focus on what is the change that you want to bring in your life. And then from these keywords, you're going to see what are the possible results, what are the people in your area, or maybe if you don't want necessarily somebody in your area, online, what would be the person that could work for you? The why, what it is that why I'm looking for therapy is one of the most important steps. What it is that you want to change. Your focusing on that will also be what you bring in therapy, and your therapist will also focus on that. That's going to be the first session. What it is that you want us to focus on, what it is that you want to work on. And maybe it's not one thing, it's 5 or 10, it doesn't matter. But start with what it is most important for you. And maybe it's a list of 5 things, it doesn't matter. And then take it from there. Another thing which is important on how to choose your therapist is focus on whether you have a preference, not necessarily, but see if you have a preference on a male or a female therapist. See whether you may ask, like, why is that important? Well, maybe sometimes in life we feel more triggered with one or the other sex. We feel more triggered, with women because we have a traumatic history with women or with men. And we are at a point that we figure out that I need to resolve that trauma, that wound from the past needs to stop getting in my way. So maybe it's better, if I am being wounded by an important woman in my life, that I have a woman psychologist. And then I know that there will be a moment of trigger with her when we go deeper. And I know that I need to stay with her and I need to discuss it with her so that we can overcome it and see myself at the other side, see myself in having resolved this issue that I have with this gender. As I said before, not necessarily. Maybe you don't have an issue with, one or the other sex. It's fine. But that would be something that you can check. Another thing that it's important, do you have a preference in a specific approach? You have tried CBT before and you don't want to do that again. You've tried that, you got the tools, you want to try something else. Or you haven't tried anything and you have heard that maybe schema therapy or EMDR helps, and you have read a couple of things about it and you want to try that. Do you have a specific approach in mind? This is my tip here. If you are quite an intellectual, a rationalizing person, and you can work with your mind very well, you're very smart, right? That means that your mind has become very skillful. However, the emotional side of you has not practiced so much. Maybe then it's good if you try with a therapist who has a more emotional approach or an approach that is more integrative, both cognitive but also emotional and experiential techniques and strategies, like, for example, schema therapy. You know that better, and keep that in mind when you're choosing a therapist. If you want to heal a trauma, for example, from the past, check whether your therapist, your potential possible therapist, has experience on trauma. They have been trained, maybe EMDR or maybe another approach that is helpful with trauma healing and trauma processing. So that's why I started with the question, what is it that you want to treat? What is your main request? Because that will bring you the filters or the answers to who is most suitable for you. Um, Another thing that we need to do here when we're choosing a therapist is um, we are not going to do window shopping, right? We're not going to go to 10 therapists, like what it is that you do, what it is that you do, and then trying to find who is the best. That's your perfectionism talking, right? We want to see whether we can create a meaningful relationship with this person, whether we can actually connect with that person. That's the most important thing in therapy. If you have a good therapeutic relationship with your therapist, that can be the fertile ground that you can actually plant the new seeds in your life. Maybe sometimes you're not going to see that connection, the deep connection, in the first session. So when you have an idea that, I can see some potential with this person, even though you don't feel 100% sure, give it a good chance. Go there for a couple of sessions, 2, 3 sessions, and see whether you can see the connection starting to be created. Also, if you see that your therapist doesn't understand you or drives the sessions into another direction, instead of saying, well, that's it, I'm done, I'm gone from here, I'm not going to come again, give it a second chance, because sometimes it's also difficult to bring this awkward conversation, like, I don't want to talk about that, I would like to focus on that area. But try that and see what happens. If indeed you mention that and you try to communicate to your therapist that I would like more of these or I would like less of these, especially in the first sessions, if you try that and then it changes, good. You have already started working on yourself, but also you have uh, taken the steering wheel. But also, if you see that this doesn't change and still your therapist doesn't understand you, then you have a clear sign that there's not enough connection here. So, having said that, um, you can also ask your friends what it is, whether they have done therapy and whether they can recommend somebody to you. And when they give you a name, don't take the name and leave. Ask them, why did you choose that person? What was in that therapist that helped you move on with your life? For some people, it can be, okay, he was okay, an okay psychologist, but it doesn't matter because he was cheap. You wouldn't have known if you wouldn't ask. So ask the other person, what was it that they liked in this therapist? Maybe they say, oh, this person was really kind and compassionate, and we did have a good rapport, and they understood me a lot, very kind and compassionate, and that was exactly what I needed. Is that also what you need? Good. Give it a try. Maybe what's important for somebody else, it's not important for us. So before you take their number and go, ask them what was it that you liked on this therapist. So I think I've covered the first part, right? If I see my notes here, let's go to the second part. 6 signs that show or uh, indicate that you have a good therapist in front of you. First of all, are they clear in how they describe their work to you? Do they provide some structure? Sometimes this is necessary because the most important thing that we need is safety, this sense of safety. So when you go to a therapist and say, well, first we're going to focus on that and we're going to do it by using these techniques, and they present, like kind of a mind map in front of you. And then what we're going to do, we're going to work on that and blah, blah, blah. Then you feel a little bit like relieved. Whew, Okay, somebody can hold me here. Somebody can share the responsibility of the next steps in my life. Good. So, first of all, do they provide some clarity, structure, and safety, a feeling of safety to you? That's a good sign. Second thing, um, are they accepting, kind, and compassionate? You don't want to be with a judging therapist. You don't want to be with somebody that makes you feel ashamed when you're leaving the session. Even though they're saying something which is uncomfortable about you, still, a good therapist will help you understand that this is me judging you, but it's me trying to understand the part of you that gets in your way. But I am here because we all have these parts, and I am here in order to help you understand this part and create another part that can help with you becoming healthier and having a better balance between these good and bad parts we all have. So you see, that's not judging. That's being human. That's him or her or them explaining to you what it means to be a human being, what it means to be judging and, punishing yourself. They're taking that part and they're taking care of that part of you so that you can also create another compassionate part. So we need to avoid judgment and also being dismissed. So if you have somebody saying to you, oh, come on, that's not that bad. Everybody has gone through that. You can see the difference between being compassionate and being judging and dismissive. So we also want to understand which side is my therapist on. You get the feeling when they're talking. Another sign, it's when you see that your therapist is making an effort in respecting your time. So, for example, they're there on time to start the sessions on time. They are not having sessions back to back and then 10 minutes late with one leads to another 10 minutes late with the next one, and so on. They're respecting your time, but they also keep the end of the session on time. So they're not prolonging the session. And I mean, I'm not talking about 5 minutes. I'm talking about half an hour or sometimes 45 minutes without including you in that. So the majority of the sessions will be on time, but if sometime your therapist thinks that I think we are at a critical point, would you have another 15 minutes to stay and wrap it up? They are including you, they're respecting you in this decision. They're making this decision together with you. It's not an either or. If they finish on time, they're good. If they don't finish on time, they're not good. But it's more about respecting your time. Also, not forgetting the sessions. I mean, we're human beings. Once in a blue moon, it can happen, right? But if you see that they're very forgetful, not only in the date that you have for the session, but also they don't remember what you discussed before, which is a sign that maybe they're not making notes. If they don't follow up with what you started last time, so last time you started discussing about your inner critic, but then next time, even though this chapter didn't finish, you go on into discussing something completely different. So when you see that there's no continuation, there's no flow, there's no consistency, and that creates a feeling of overwhelmness and anxiety in you, maybe that's a sign that this is not a good match. Maybe for somebody else it would work, but if it doesn't work with you, it's fine. Another sign is, um, if you notice that there's a connection with your therapist, if you see that they are doing all these exercises with you, but not in a robotic and empty way. They're not just facilitating a workshop, right? They're not just throwing theories on you and blowing your mind with all the new things that you didn't know so far. They're working with you. They're going there, they're going deeper, they're connecting emotionally. It's more like a human to human interaction. I'm not saying that you're becoming friends. No, but it's a more warm relationship. You feel held. You feel embraced there. You feel that this person knows you. You really know me. And um, you also see that your therapist is not practicing emotional avoidance. Let me give you an example. Sometimes, as therapists, we know that the client is in a difficult position in expressing feelings. And we know that it's hard, but because we know it already, we kind of enable it. So we don't say anything because, we don't want to bring you into an uncomfortable position, even more uncomfortable. So the avoidance of the client becomes also the avoidance of the therapist. You actually want a therapist who will talk about the elephant in the room. I see that you're feeling uncomfortable. I see that you're avoiding getting in touch with the feeling, and it's okay. If it's uncomfortable for you, we are not ready for that. We're going to try it another time. This is, even though they're not working with you on that, if you feel not working with you on that session, they are calling it, they are talking about it, which is the opposite of the emotional avoidance. So sometimes just because we feel things, we don't say them, which doesn't make any difference between the client or the therapist. The therapist needs to make a difference. The therapist needs to facilitate the emotional expression and emotional comfort with what you're experiencing and what you're feeling. And of course, a good therapist is the one that respects the boundaries between your personal life and their personal life. As I said before, you're not becoming friends. A therapist may disclose some part of their life, but this is not a conversation between friends that you say yours, I say mine. A therapist is the one that creates this warmth in their relationship, but at the same time protects you from extra burden from their life. So that's also very important, that they focus on you, that you feel that even though I heard something from my therapist's life, even though they shared something with me, still, I feel that the focus is on me. Still, I feel that I'm not carrying a burden or some baggage from my therapist's life. Last but not least, your therapist, actually, not your therapist, every therapist needs to have their own therapist and supervisor. Why is that important? Because we need to keep our own life, and I'm speaking on behalf of all the therapists, colleagues that have been practicing that profession. We have to keep our own stuff, our own struggles, because we all have struggles, right? We have to keep them from getting in the way of therapy. We have to keep them from projecting them into your into the session with you. So that's, in order for that to happen, we also need a therapist. And sometimes, we don't need to have a therapist every week. Sometimes we start and stop with our therapy, but also we need to have supervision so that we make sure that we keep ourselves how to say, in balance, but also in touch with our therapeutic qualities, with the strategies that we want to use, with why we're choosing this over that approach. And that is something that our supervisors are helping. So in order for somebody to practice at a good level of therapy, these are some of the things that needs to happen. And maybe sometimes you don't know whether your therapist has a therapist or a supervisor. It's fine. You don't need to, dig very deep. But sometimes your therapist themselves, they will say that to you. They will say, like, I'm bringing some things in my supervision, but I don't disclose any personal information. Don't worry about that. But I would need, for example, to tape this session. They would say something like that, right? And then you will know that this person has a supervisor. So having a supervisor is not an indication that somebody is a beginner, not at all. That's an indication that somebody is a professional, somebody who wants to make sure that they have their game on top, and that they are really making sure that they are providing quality work in their sessions. So I hope I gave you some idea. What I want you to remember is that we said all these things. You got a good grasp of it. And now you can put it aside. When you go for the first session with a psychologist, don't go with a checklist. This is not an interview. Go as a human to human. Try to see whether you can bring the element of connection in there, even though you don't share everything about your life. This is not about the amount of sharing. Just see whether there's a rapport, whether there's a connection, whether there's understanding in there. Try to connect with them instead of having this checklist, check, 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 and putting your therapist into this interrogation mode, or not even putting them on a pedestal that they are the best, right? Balanced, human to human. Let's see where this goes. I'm going to do my best. Let's see what happens from the other side. So I hope that this gave you a good idea. Let me know your comments, your experience with therapy. Remember, sometimes therapy doesn't work because we haven't found a good match. And it's okay. It's happening. It has happened to me as well. It's okay. We keep trying without carrying this predisposition that therapy doesn't work, never works. All psychologists, they're not good. They don't get me. Go out there, because the most important thing is that you feel better. The most important thing is that you reach your goals and you become the person you want and have the life that you want to have. And a good therapist is there to help you with that. Thank you very much. If you have any other questions, please put them in the comments. If you want to share your own experience, if you want to add another sign of a good therapist, because this is something that you have seen in your therapy with your therapist, please, I would love to hear that. And let's take this conversation even further. If you want anything else in regards to mental health, have a look at my videos at the YouTube channel, or the blog articles that we post very often on antiloneness.com. It was lovely to have you here. Take good care of yourself.